Hello and welcome to our Think CX webinar. Very happy to have all of you here. I can see that we have attendees starting to log in, so I think I'm just going to give it maybe 30 seconds. So enjoy another sip of coffee or whatever your favorite drink is, and we'll just get started here very quickly. All right, let's get going. I see that we have still people logging in, but in the interest of time, we'll get going. So I'm John Tremblay. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Evolv AI, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. This is our 17th Think CX in the series, and we are going to focus today on the user experience. So with me are Chris and Phyllis, who also work at Evolv AI. And they're really going to dive into some of the do's and don'ts of what's working with UX today. As always, if you have any questions, please ask in the chat area. If we don't have time to address your questions live, we'll make sure to respond through email after the event. And we are recording this event, and it will be available for playback after the event as well. So let me introduce our two speakers. With me is Chris Perkins. Chris joined Evolv AI a couple months ago. He's part of a very continued and rapid acquisition of new employees as we continue to grow and scale our business. Chris brings just a tremendous amount of experience. He's a veteran, having worked for a lot of leading agencies like Hal Riney and Partners, Ogilvy, Arnold Worldwide, and Wrap. He also was the CMO for the United States leading brand USA. This was the first global inbound tourism development program here in the US. And he's led lots and lots of campaigns, in fact, over 112 countries with top brands like HP, Microsoft, Chrysler, Jeep, Ford, Jack Daniels, McDonald's, Wendy's, Pepsi, and a lot more. Like I said, Chris just brings a phenomenal amount of experience to our team and our expert services. One thing to note about Chris is he's really most at home on a body of water while fishing. And then we have Phyllis Wong. So Phyllis is a Evolv AI veteran. She's been with us over 2.5 years. She is a driven software developer based in San Francisco, although right now she's in our offices in Ireland. She's super passionate about working towards solutions in both UI and UX, also STEM education, diversity, and inclusion. Phyllis really thrives in looking at a customer's point of view, analyzing the big picture, and zooming into the weeds to work on the details. And I know Phyllis likes to say that she enjoys being a gardener for a code base. So let's dive into the topic today. There's a lot of surveys out there that are talking about CX, and we'll talk about UX here and put it in its context. So there was a survey from SuperOffice. They're a cloud-based CRM company. They had over 1,900 responders. And one of the questions that they ask is, over the next 5 years, what are your top priorities? And CX, as you can see, was by far the leading priority in terms of what was really important. And I think that highlights the fact that CX has truly become a differentiator. In fact, it's starting to carry more weight on consumer decisions than price and product itself, which is why it reflects this priority and focus by companies. And digging a little deeper into some of the other sources out there, so the Temco Group also put out a survey, and what they were looking at is the impact that great CX has on the ability to generate more revenue. And they broke it down into larger companies, so companies that have $1 billion or more in annual sales. And their conclusion was that if you invest in customer experience, within 3 years, they can generate an additional $700 million in revenue. And then they also looked at SaaS companies, and then they saw that the increase there was even bigger. So for many of the SaaS companies, it potentially represents over $1 billion in incremental revenue if you can get the customer experience correctly. And then Pricewaterhousecoopers also recently put some research about the impact that it has on the willingness to purchase a product or service. And what they identified was that 86% of buyers are willing to pay more if they're receiving great CX. And what's interesting is that this is fairly elastic in that the more expensive the item, the more they're willing to pay a premium if it's a good experience. In fact, if you look at luxury items, the price premium that people are willing to pay for great customer experience is between 13 to 18%. So that's some pretty serious consideration around the importance of customer experience and its impact not only on people's desire to purchase something, but what they're willing to pay for it. And then kind of the last statistic that I thought was really interesting was the impact of good CX on the spot or spontaneous or in the moment purchases. And this survey showed that basically almost half of the customers will make a purchase in the moment if they're receiving great customer experience, and especially if it's personalized. We really strongly feel that personalized experiences and personalized CX is the holy grail for the next few years. But I think if we're all honest, there are very, very few companies that do a good job at it. I think most of the personalized experiences out there are pretty poor. They're poor because they're not able to deliver a contextual and relevant experience that's highly personalized. And again, that's an area where a lot of companies, including ourselves, are very focused on trying to solve that particular issue. So a couple of definitions here, because what I love about technology is that we're so riddled with acronyms, and a lot of times they don't even mean the same thing to different people. So just let's bear with me as I kind of lay the stage here. So CX has kind of become this umbrella. It encompasses, in essence, anything that impacts what a customer experiences, from the sales process to the delivery to how it's priced, and of course, the user experience, particularly in digital channels. So within CX is UI or user interface, which is what impacts what a user sees and experiences. But what's really our focus today is what lies between those two things, which is user experience or UX, right? And this is, in essence, what encompasses everything that you're going to do on an app or a website, what a visitor or customer is going to be able to do and experience, how effective is it for them to find the information and complete the task that they've set out to do, and on, right? So this is our focus for the webinar today. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to jump in with our panelists right now. Just one second. Okay, so Chris, let's jump into this if you don't mind, real quick. Let's talk about this whole UX today and how it goes way beyond just simply changing the color or placement of a button or a little bit of copy. So can you share with us your perspective on where UX is at today?
Absolutely, John, thanks. You know, what's interesting is one of the greatest failures in testing and in UX is the gap that people leave between the insights that are gleaned from testing and sharing it out to the CX team, and vice versa. I mean, affecting sales successfully, affecting customer experience and user experience is critical across the line throughout the organization. And while a lot of the testing dynamics are obviously in a digital ecosystem, there's no reason why, in fact, it's illogical for companies not to share those insights back and forth and across the organizations. Obviously, there's some of those ideas that don't necessarily scale, like the shape of a button or the color of a button may not. But the call to action dynamics, there are a variety of different elements that are oftentimes viewed as very kind of menial or basic in a testing dynamic, but frankly have pretty broad reaching implications and could be affected in direct mail and email and in point of sale and other places. So I think it's a real missed opportunity for organizations to keep things siloed, and too many of them do. So I think that's a real opportunity for brands to think holistically.
Very good. What about the importance of having a well thought out strategy when it comes to UX?
Well, it reminds me of the classic ready, fire, aim, right? Weak strategy means weak outcomes unless you get lucky. And we all know that in business, we can't afford to be lucky. It's nice when you get lucky on top of a good strategy, but frankly, a great strategy will help you there. And again, I think the taking a holistic view of getting to a good strategy, there's all kinds of qualitative and quantitative inputs that are practical and standard, but even going beyond to assess things like ideas on the rise in culture. What are consumer behaviors that are happening outside of the ecosystem that you're really trying to take the strategy into? Things that are going on like a Clubhouse, right? When Clubhouse became a phenomenon, and people moved to an audio-only channel of experience, what are the implications there from a strategy perspective that could be taken into a testing regiment and to a testing environment? And so, being strategic and then doing a really, really solid job of having the UX strategist collaborating tightly with the designers and the customer and team, right? So one of the big opportunities is really making sure that the customer team is, as I said earlier, connecting the dots throughout the organization so that the strategy isn't just isolated to a specific page or a testing dynamic on a site, thinking much more holistically. At least that's how I would look at it for sure.
Yeah, Phyllis, you spent a lot of time in the trenches. So what are some of your takeaways from working with some of our clients and how they're tackling strategy?
Well, there's a few different ways that people are going about trying to increase revenue or a specific KPI. And one of the things that I see kind of frequently that doesn't seem to really connect to the testing environment that would be really great if we could tie it together is it measurable? Do we want to optimize this and do we want to make this better? Well, okay, if we do optimize this and make it better, is it measurable? For example, there's a particular use case where somebody has a very large portion of their sales completion goes through their chat widget, but the point of sale counting or ability to capture that event happens outside of the chat. And so how can we make this experience better if the thing that counts the event of the sale point happening is disconnected? And so finding ways to guide people into optimizing areas and looking at places that we can measure and count and track will, I think, help user experience 100%. The other thing is okay, who are the types of users that want to purchase online? Who are the users that want to actually go to a website? And are those types of users ones who want to talk to somebody through a chat? Typically, no. Somebody wants to go onto a website and be able to press a couple buttons, press a final click, and all of a sudden the thing is just on its way to them. And so really understanding the users and buying patterns of people who would choose to purchase online outside of a store is, I think, really important to take into consideration.
Now, those are really good points. So let's keep going with you. So what are the three elements of UX today that you see clients wanting to make that just don't work in 2021?
Well, a couple of things that I've seen that people consistently request is whole page redesigns. Whole page redesigns all at once don't get us to those granularity of what are the small things that we can actually measure and see what had the impact. So when you do a full page redesign, you may get some improvement, but you don't know what specific part of that redesign was the driving force of changing the action or increasing the event happening. And so another thing that I see is a lot of really beautiful design right above the fold, but no action or no call to action or no instruction to the user to say, here's where I can actually take action and where I can buy something. So having some way to guide the user to take action that's above the fold without having to dig for it, I think is really important.
Chris, any thoughts on this topic as well?
Yeah, I mean, Phyllis, one of the things that I've heard you talk about is making it easy for the the user to see what they want, to make that next choice. Sometimes design gets in the way. Sometimes the intent of design is pure, but the actual user experience is very terrible. One of the things I recall you talking about was a customer that brought forward a carousel for putting offers in front of the users. Tell us a little bit about how that was a kind of a mixed opportunity in terms of its utility.
Yeah, the utility of it was confusing for one. And the intent was to try and help the user purchase the premium option that was available, but the premium option was in a carousel in the back and it was grayed out and you couldn't actually access it. You first had to touch on either side to get the carousel to rotate to then get them to the more optimal purchase, for them to buy. And that user experience is actually, one, it was confusing. Two, it actually leads to a reduction in sales or the amount that's purchased during that sale. And then if you scroll down past that, there was something that looked exactly like that had similar language on it that made it seem like the things that were laid out alongside and static were the same, but just presented differently, but they actually weren't. And so there was a lot of confusion. And as an end user, I was like, I'm not sure exactly which thing I'm going to get here. And it's not very clear. And so trying to remove the types of distractions that lead to confusion will help users actually be able to make decisions and then buy.
Yeah. What about the issue of population diversity? I know we're very scientific in our approach to UX and what works and doesn't work, but I think a lot of times we can see some of these ideas that are perhaps not that great, but if you're not running in the background the right experiments and you don't have good population diversity, how does that lead to you continuing to perhaps make poor decisions?
Yeah, so let's say you want to test a few text updates, and there are four different ideas of changing the text on the CTA, and you want to know which one is going to be optimal, and then you have some color changes you want to do, but then you have this one other thing where you're going to move something from somewhere else that's below the fold and bring it up above the fold. The way you want to configure your variables, which are your hypotheses, and then the variants, which are the different ideas that you're going to test underneath that hypothesis, is you want to make sure that if you have a really high impact idea and some smaller, like more subtle changes to make, you want to configure it so that your movement of the item above the fold doesn't have 8 different ways that you move it, because you're not going to see that in the population of different combinations that get reconfigured very often. And so you want to make sure that you have enough ideas that you're testing, so when the system starts to gain some insight and starts to remove some variants because they're not performing as well, and the system reconfigures all the different options that it has, so all the different ideas into a single experience that a user gets that we can test. You want to have a diverse enough set of ideas, so when it recombines, they're not so close together that the system isn't able to very easily distinguish between which ones are the good performers and which ones are not performing as well.
Yeah, and doesn't this lead to also one of the challenges that we see where clients are using too many variables against control, and it becomes quite challenging to figure out what's actually working?
Yeah, that's the other thing, is you really need to understand the number or the unique visitors that are going to land into the experiment, and then what's the percentage that they're going to convert. And if we have a lot of traffic and a high conversion rate, you can test a ton of ideas and get to statistical significance really well. But if you have lower amounts of users that make it to that section of the funnel, let's say you're not optimizing your landing page where you have millions of people visiting per day, instead you're optimizing towards improving the checkout flow, you probably have a lot less users that are unique that are going to make it to that area. So you need to test fewer ideas to get to statistical significance and learn quicker which ideas are good and which ideas we should remove. And based on that learning, do an iteration and change and say, wait a minute, we learned something here. We thought this hypothesis was important. And what we're finding out is it's actually not having a really good impact. And so now we need to go and do another heuristic analysis and say, what are the other things that could potentially be stopping people from continuing on through that funnel?
Yeah, and that's a conundrum in of itself, right? Because especially in retail, we see a lot of customers that just want to boil the ocean, right? So it becomes these massive projects. We're going to redesign the website. It's going to take a month. Then they're going to start thinking about, well, what kind of experimentation platforms could we put behind all this? And they just sequence all these things rather than kind of start now and start learning and just iterate in smaller steps, right? Would you agree, Chris and Phyllis, that continues to be a pattern that many companies follow?
It is indeed, and in fact, it's really important that the business objectives that are being planned out as part of the roadmap be tied to the testing plan. A lot of times they're kind of disconnected, and sometimes the designers even internally in organizations are thinking about things that they can affect from a design perspective that don't necessarily have any grounds for being practical in terms of the way that they'd be applied. So collaborating across the line and through the line and being very, very clear about the causality of the business intent, what the ultimately, serving the key master, which is the end user, right? Because if we're not putting them at the absolute center of everything, then we're missing the real reality of what we're here to do. But having the business and the kind of IT team and strategy team and design team all in sync, so that we have a very clear unified plan, and we don't have any crosstalk that affects the ability for the test to be pure or actually meaningful, but also that we're not asking testing to do something it can't. All
right, let's switch gears now. This was super insightful. I like the takeaways. So now let's dig into, well, what is working and what is it that companies should be implementing right away? Phyllis, let's start with you.
So some of the things that I've seen that work really well right away are making really clear what the next step is. If you enter a user, let's say on your basket or cart page, and the CTA says, finish purchase, but when you click on it, you end up in a checkout flow that's got 8 steps. Well, that's not clear and it's not distinctive. And so actually that little tiny minor change that lets the user know what's coming next actually could have a really dramatic impact. And so what's really working is taking those small minor changes. I mean, taking your full page redesign and going, okay, what of this can I test in small micro increments and start incorporating into the current design to see what parts of this actually do have an impact, and then start to build up into that change with the things that do work and actually drive the KPI.
And Chris?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think unifying the plan around that, but starting from the user and stepping back and being literally physically forcing yourself to go through what are those steps, what's and even thinking like how much time and effort, how does this feel in a mobile environment versus a tablet versus a desktop, and being very, very thoughtful around the details around that. We often forget, we're in the corporate environment, we're so busy thinking about what we want to do that we often forget that we have to really step into the shoes of the user and really listen to what they're telling us, both from a data perspective, but also a qualitative perspective, because there's a lot of cues there, and being very mindful of that as well.
Yeah, and what about some of the decisions that we're seeing that work in terms of where to start in the funnel and in the journey?
Well, if the end goal is to increase revenue, a lot of people want to start on the landing page because they assume that this is the first place people land, and so we should start optimizing here. But really, between the landing page and where the point of sale happens is like quite a few different pages down the way. And so what I've seen work really well is starting to optimize as close as possible to where that final sale point is, and making sure that that page is become easier to use and helps to guide the user, and then moving your way up the funnel while still keeping that sales metric in mind. That works really, really well.
Interesting. And Chris, you touched on mobile versus desktop. So how important is it for companies to really optimize those in parallel?
It's critical. And I mean, obviously the mindset's different. The use case is different. Sometimes you actually might have both devices open at the same time. I know that I definitely, in a big complex decision, might be doing that as a user. So, but being really thoughtful of the user experience in every channel, and even beyond, right? Because there's any digital ecosystem, there can be testing done, right? So whether it's email or you know, a kiosk, an ATM machine, you know, any of those environments, the dynamics of testing is the same, right? Be very mindful of the way that the user is thinking about the space, and be very, very purposeful in understanding what we're asking them to do, making it as easy as possible with the fewest steps possible. And you know, thinking about things like on a you know, mobile device, you know, are they on the move, right? Are they in a low light environment? You know, there's a lot of different dynamics that you need to think about versus a desktop, which is very much going to be a kind of a fixed environment with a lot more flexibility to present information in a kind of consistent manner. And we also have the dynamic of, you know, I don't know about you, but last time I was on a plane, I looked around and the number of devices being used that were mobile devices, and the sizes and shapes, and now they fold. And I mean, you know, used to be that a phone was a phone, and now a phone is a tablet, is a phablet, is lots of different things. So, you know, from a testing perspective, we have to be much more mindful of what that experience and use case will be, and pick up on all the data and qualitative cues to really be responsive in that.
Yeah, and Amanda just asked a question. Would you recommend different experiences on mobile versus desktop? And I think that's something that we have a lot of experience working with clients, and in different countries where mobile is a predominant device. And I would say in general, and I want you to expand on that, the answer is absolutely yes. And also, you know, Phyllis, if you can comment, is a tablet more like a mobile device, or is it kind of more like a desktop, or is it its own animal? So thoughts on different experiences of mobile versus desktop, and then we're going to wrap up.
So I think it's really important to think about mobile and desktop differently. One, because you don't interact with the device in the same way. There's a lot of like swipe and gesture that you can do on a cell phone that you can't do on a desktop. The mouse, the trackpad doesn't act the same as a mobile device. And you have to think about the end product that the user is actually purchasing. I will oftentimes search for things on my phone when I'm on the move or in public transit, but I have no intention of making the purchase there because it's just easier to do on the phone. Whereas a lot of companies want to have a responsive design where they take one thing that can just flex into all the different devices. And that at this point, I don't think is working as well anymore. And then tablet, of course, when it's in portrait view, tends to be scoped to have the same experience as a mobile device. And then you flip it landscape, and then all of a sudden now you have the desktop view, but you still have all the gesturing and all the capability that you do when you interact with a mobile device. And so without thinking about those things and taking into consideration, like, okay, what is the age group of people who are typically going to be using this in landscape view, or who is going to use this, and what is the end product, and what is the actual thing that we're trying to achieve here? It's a little bit of a miss. So consider it always, and recognize the way people interact with those different devices is quite different, and we should consider that in testing.
Yeah, and Chris, bring us home. But I know that from some of the experience that we've had with our clients, that we're testing the same ideas, but their implementation by device varies dramatically. And you end up really having to, you want that brand consistency and experience consistency, but you have to treat each channel very differently.
That's right. Not only do you have to treat each channel differently, you know, testing is a never-ending process. consumer behaviors and attitudes and kind of preferences shift constantly. Even their interest in various categories shift, over time. So, you have to continue a testing program and be very, rigorous around understanding where to take the friction out, where to kind of smooth things out. And frankly, we're all looking for newer, different experiences. So the last thing, like, think of a brand as a friend. You don't want to have the same conversation with a friend over and over again. That, at least not until we're really old. So why should brands do that? And testing can actually really help with that. And being rigorous about it on an ongoing basis is key.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We are at time. I think this has been a fascinating conversation, and we will be doing more of these. This seemed to be a pretty popular topic. So I want to thank both Chris and Phyllis for their time today and insights, and all of you who decided to spend a half hour with us. Again, we've recorded this and we will make it available. And thank you very much.